Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, our police chief officially steps down today. We're talking about what happened and why it's broken trust between the mayor and city council. Downtown is getting hundreds of millions of dollars for a makeover, but it is not clear yet, at least to us, where it's all going to go. And a county program to make Narcan more accessible has hit some snags. Plus, we've got some Pittsburgh celebrity news. It's November 1st, the Friday News Roundup. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with CityCast producers Mallory Falk and Sophia Lowe. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy weekend, almost.
Almost weekend. I want to play a little something for y'all.
I've had Steelers season tickets since I'm 7 years old, man. Me and my dad, that's our thing.
Here we go, Steelers! Here we go!
I was a 7-year-old with a little mullet, just like a Pittsburgher should have, with a Cordell Stewart jersey on, sitting at Three Rivers Stadium watching in 1995.
Is this what you've been giggling about all week? You've been talking about the Steelers ad that, when you say ad, my brain turns off.
I know. We are all so sick of political commercials, but this one makes me laugh because it's just so specific. They found this random Pittsburgh guy with this thick Yinzer accent, and the whole thing is just covered in black and gold. Plus, he's talking about a kid with a mullet, and I currently have a Pittsburgh child with a mullet.
Okay, I do not watch Steelers games as we have established on this show, so I did not see this ad. Catch me up. What is the deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, that's just a tiny snippet from this new Kamala Harris ad that dropped just before Monday Night Football this week. So I actually saw it on Instagram first, but then I was watching the game and it ran during the game. I cannot fathom what that must have cost the campaign.
Right? And it's so specific, too. It's not like you can play this in the other side of the state. That would probably lose you some votes.
I didn't even think of that. I wonder if that was an ad that played only in our market or if it played elsewhere too. If you're a Giants fan or something, that would have been really funny to see that in New York State and see the Kamala Steelers ad. Anyway, I just think the whole thing builds on this theme that the Harris campaign specifically has been pushing a ton, at least in TV and radio commercials, is that Donald Trump is quote unquote rich as hell and that regular people aren't. And what's he going to do for you? Politics aside, just purely as a marketing strategy, I think it's kind of brilliant and so weirdly blunt.
Oh, so what else actually happens in this ad? Because so far all we've established is that this Yinzer is extremely Yinzer.
No, this is the other part of the ad that's just been making me giggle.
He's a little rich kid, too, he ain't me. Little silver spoon boy Donald Trump. How is he relatable to me whatsoever? The guy literally lives in a country club. Do I look like a country club kind of guy?
That's kind of funny.
Little silver spoon boy just makes me laugh.
Maybe I'll watch the whole thing later, but if you want to hear more election news, especially, more of the local races, we will be covering that next week for everyone who's been procrastinating on doing their research.
Truly, we're running up and down the ballot, so definitely get ready. Let's get to this week's news. First up today, the ongoing saga of our now outgoing city police chief. So today, Friday, is actually Larry Scirotto's official last day. He's been on vacation for a few days now, but he is retiring at the ripe old age of 50.
That's the dream. That's what I want.
I know, right?
Yeah, I don't know. Pittsburgh's a big tech city. I'm still looking for that elusive tech job that allows me to retire at, well, I was going to say 30, but that ship has sailed. Anyway, this has been a big development, this news about the police chief, since we last talked about it. Last week on our very show, we brought on Mayor Gainey, and he talked about Scirotto picking back up this side gig refereeing college basketball. The mayor told us first, actually, I think we were the ones to break this news, that the police chief would be taking a pay cut in order to pursue this side gig.
Mm-hmm. Very big drama. And, the TV stations in particular were talking all about it.
Yeah, I mean, for good reason, right? Refereeing can be its own career. It's really cool. But these weren't local colleges. This was a contract with the Big Ten, which means a lot of travel. The closest schools are Penn State and Ohio State. But most of them would mean a plane ride at least. And I think it's also important too, college basketball happens every day of the week. It is not like football, which is mostly a a weekend thing. And Scirotto had agreed to reffing at least 40 games between now and March. Like, that is a lot of time.
Yeah, so again, Scirotto was chief, but he was going to be a referee in what the city called his free time.
Yeah, quote unquote.
And we also now know that he had 9 weeks of vacation time. So he actually did have a lot more free time than I would have expected. Side note, if any of the higher-ups at CityCast are listening, come on, compete with the city. Give us those 9 weeks.
No kidding. So then, Gainey tells us that Scirotto is actually going to have to take a pay cut since it's going to involve at least some time that he's not in the city to act as chief. And Scirotto even appointed a deputy, Assistant Chief Chris Ragland, to step in as acting chief anytime he is not available, not in the city, anytime he's away.
You know, all this noise was building up, and then Scirotto just quits,
retires. Yeah, just done.
Yeah, 3 days after we talked to Gainey, Scirotto announced his plans to officially retire, and those are effective today, November 1st. He said in a statement that he didn't want all the drama of this basketball stuff to take away from just the regular business of policing.
This totally added drama.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this week. So City Council held a special session on Tuesday to talk all about it, like how we got here and what happens next. It was so long.
Yeah, Megan, kudos for watching that whole thing. You were keeping us updated all day.
Thank you. Yeah, I so appreciate having someone give me the tidbits of council meetings instead of watching the whole thing myself.
Yes. Happy to be the go-between. I think the overall tenor, like, council was pissed. I think it is fair to say pissed. If you read our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter, and I hope you do, you may know a little bit of this, but just to recap, the basic timeline seems to be that well over a year ago, when Larry Scirotto was just a finalist for the police chief job, he and Mayor Ed Gainey and members of the mayor's administration quietly agreed as part of the hiring of Larry Scirotto that he would not ref any games for his first year. So I think that's important. Just the 1 year. And since he, took over that position in the summer and college basketball picks up in the fall, we got some bonus time, right? Like, he made it that full year, and now it's the fall and basketball was starting back up, and Scirotto was offered this contract with the Big Ten. So he takes it to Gainey and says, let's revisit this. And they have all these conversations, but neither Gainey, his administrators, nor Scirotto told City Council about that deal. Not the one a year ago.
Yikes.
And not the contract this year. And they also didn't put a darn thing in writing.
Double yikes.
Yeah, I mean, District 4 Counselor Anthony Coghill played a clip this week. This is from last year, clarifying this exact thing with Scirotto during his job interview with council. So this is Coghill speaking to Scirotto.
At the time.
So, the one thing we didn't touch on, and I felt was important for the public to know and for you to just express, was I have other professional experiences, NCAA men's basketball referee. Now, let me just explain to the public or anybody that cares, this is not high school. Could be a real profession, and it is a real profession. You made probably a decent paycheck doing that. When I see you were, in a Final Four game, that could lead into the NBA, that could lead into other things. So I think it's important, number one, I know, and I just wanted you to express to people, I know that you have committed to not pursue that profession while you're here as a Pittsburgh police chief, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so
He brought the receipts.
yeah, pretty straightforward. You will not do this. Scirotto says, I will not do this.
And not like, I will not do this for now. I will not do this. That's it.
Yeah. So Coghill plays this in this meeting this week to council and to the people who are there convened to answer questions. That includes Jake Pollock, the mayor's city manager, our chief operations officer, Lisa Frank, and then the public safety director, Lee Schmidt, plus the new acting chief, Chris Ragland. Mayor Gainey and Scirotto aren't there. Scirotto was invited and did not come. So Coghill plays this clip, and then this is what he says to the 4 people who did show up.
Did he lie to us?
I can't answer that question for him.
So to the point, so blunt.
I know. So that was Pollock answering there. Again, the city manager. Elsewhere in the meeting, Lisa Frank, and Lee Schmidt, the public safety director, they all work under the purview of the mayor. They all say they knew about this deal going back over a year. But council is the one that makes the final call on the chief, on verifying his salary, on hiring him, and no one told them. And they were so upset about it.
I totally understand that. If they're the one that gets to make the final call on the chief and they've been left out this whole time, like, I would also be furious.
Yeah, that is like quite a piece of information to withhold. I mean, I guess on Scirotto's side, it sounds like he was working within the bounds of, how this job was described to him, that after a year he would have the opportunity to pursue this. So technically, he wasn't doing anything he hadn't kind of been given the okay for by his boss.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I feel like when he took this job, he had to have known or like assumed that there would be some backlash for him doing this because, he has this really high profile position. And then it's one thing to, take a ref job in the city, but it's a whole other thing to take one that would, mean you'd be traveling all over the country, wouldn't be here,
Oh, for sure. I am not defending this choice. I'm just saying, it's not like he did something like fully unauthorized that he hadn't already cleared with his superior.
Yeah.
But kind of given all that has happened, I can't imagine that everything is super smooth now between the mayor and city council.
Yeah, I mean, this meeting goes on, and a ton of it is about this idea of broken trust between council and the mayor's office. They ask at one point, like, whether Scirotto ever even intended to be a full-time, long-term chief because he did only serve less than a year and a half. I do think it's worth reminding listeners here, Scirotto had worked in Pittsburgh before, so he served as a police officer in various roles for over 20 years before he moved on to another policing gig in Florida. But then he came back at the chief level. So if you hold a new rank for at least a year, that means that affects your pension down the line. So once you retire, once you start drawing on your pension, you get paid out every single year. And becoming a chief is a much higher level than what he would have gotten before.
Right.
But also, I think this idea of broken trust also goes back to Mayor Gainey and this idea that he and his administration are maybe intentionally and willfully withholding information from council. And there was this insinuation and at one point, like kind of direct back and forth, that if they're doing it for this, what other things maybe are they doing it for? Like, are there other half-truths going on somewhere in city government that they should be afraid of?
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. But I want to back up to what you were saying about the pension. How much money is Scirotto going to get out of this?
Solo always wants to know about the money. District 4 Councilor Anthony Coghill, he did some back-of-the-napkin math there in the council meeting. So the city did $80,000 on the national search to find Scirotto. So we got to do something. Again, it may not be a national search, but, we had hired a firm to do that. So we picked Scirotto. He's offered a salary of $184,000, $185,000. I've seen multiple reports somewhere in there, which was $40,000 more than his predecessor, than the chief that served just before him. And he had way more years of service. And then, so before becoming chief, Scirotto's pension would have been about $50,000 a year. So assuming he lives a nice, long, healthy life, he'd get $50K every year as part of his pension. That's just part of the collective bargaining agreement with police.
Man.
Pensions are calculated by years of service and by rank. So the fact that he served as chief for over a year now means that he will make $92,500 from the city of Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Until he passes away. And he is only 50 years old and healthy, I will point out, enough to be reffing NCAA college basketball games. Like, you have to be really fit to do that.
The Gen Z in me is just still shocked that retirement plans like this still exist.
I know, right? Like, pensions are not a thing that a lot of us in the private sector really get to think about.
It is wild, too, though, because if you think about this handshake agreement, then it really was lining up the timeline of just get to the point where you qualify for this and then go with God.
Yeah, I mean, it really is interesting. I mean, on the one hand, I really don't have a beef with a pension. That's part of becoming an officer. It is part of your collective bargaining agreement.
It'd be nice if more people had pensions too. Yeah,
right.
That's not the part that's upsetting me.
I know. But it is a heck of a lot more money. So anyway, we'll skip through most of the rest of it. There was more to the meeting. Counselors actually oddly mostly praised Scirotto. A bunch of them were talking about how upset they were that he was leaving. doing. They liked a lot of his policies, the direction he was taking the Bureau, that he actually picked up the phone when they called, that he came to stuff, that he was invested in kids. I think the gist is that they really wish that Gainey had been more clear about all of this from the jump so that they could make an informed decision about whether to hire Scirotto at all, or at least come to them a month ago and tell them about this plan to referee, and so they all could have worked through it together.
Right.
At least at Scirotto, it seemed like there was really big, like, we're not mad, we're disappointed energy. Like, they actually said that phrase a few times. But I guess all that's spilled milk now. And in the meantime, we now have to figure out who our next chief is. And Gainey is, of course, running for re-election. And he has just made, enemy's probably too strong a word, but he has at least like put counsel on the defense a little bit in a weird way going into a re-election campaign.
Totally. So what happens next with the chief position then?
Yeah. So Ragland, the person who was, bless him, he had to like try to answer some of these questions. And it was very clear he was not part of any of this going way, way back. He was chosen by Scirotto to be his quote unquote deputy chief. Fun fact, though, that title actually does not exist anymore. It's not in our budget. So his technical title is assistant chief, and deputy gets a little bit weird. But he's going to be serving as acting chief for the indefinite future. Coghill, the counselor from District 4, for his part, he says he will not approve funding another national search, that we're going to have to figure out something else. It's also possible council could pass it without his vote. But actually, to that deputy point, I will leave you with this. District 3 Councilman Bob Charland had this spicy little exchange with the city manager, that's Jake Pollock again, about Pollock calling himself the deputy mayor. It's actually even on his LinkedIn, which, according to Charland's read on our home rule charter, that is not a title unless Gainey is out of town. So this is Charland talking to Pollock.
Is the mayor in town today?
Yes.
Okay. You refer to yourself as deputy mayor, and by the home rule charter, you can only refer to yourself as deputy mayor when the mayor is out of town. And in every other administration, we receive notification when the mayor is out of town and who is acting to sign their signature. So we've not received one of those from Mayor Gainey. And there are times when I'm, are you in charge? Is he in charge? Who's in town? Who's not?
So the reason I wanted to play that is just because I think it's kind of petty, but also like really suggestive of the relationship between the mayor's office and council right now. Like in the wake of all of this, like they're coming at each other about titles and who's in town when and where are the receipts for this or that. I mean, for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure the mayor's office is supposed to send those notifications when he's out of town to the controller's office and the clerk. And like maybe that's just not getting passed on to council. Like it's not necessarily a bad thing. But I just think this like it's indicative of the state of the relationship that like as part of this larger meeting, they're now being like, well, you can't call yourself deputy. Well, yes, I can. Well, this is what our charter says. Well, I don't agree with you. Like it's just like it's a lot to take in all at once.
I mean, just between election season, budget season, and now all of this is just like a lot of back and forth between our electeds right now. There is a lot going on.
And apparently a lot of trust to rebuild.
Stunning stalactites, stupendous stalagmites, flowing limestones frozen in time, formations that are bigger than most houses. Luray Caverns has so many jaw-dropping marvels, you have to see it to believe it. And after the awe and wonder of the caverns, explore local history at the Shenandoah Heritage Museum. Get a hands-on lesson in geology as you mine for gems at the Gem Sluice. See the oldest operating car in America at the Car and Carriage Caravan. And take a look at the simpler life on the streets of Toy Town Junction. For almost 150 years, families have been unlocking all the must-see wonders of nature that you can discover at Luray Caverns 365 days a year. Plan the perfect holiday adventure your whole family will love at luraycaverns.com. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I want to take a moment to shout out my cat, Pistachio. You are so good. Thank you for always crawling onto my lap and purring whenever I'm stressed. This time of year, I am thinking a lot about gratitude. And while we might always remember to thank our loved ones or our pets, there's one person we often forget to thank: ourselves. And one way to make space for you and your feelings is through therapy, because sometimes cuddling your pet isn't enough. You need to talk it out. And therapy can help you learn to set boundaries, and it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. If you've been thinking about giving therapy a try, one fast way to get connected with a therapist is with BetterHelp. It's entirely online, so it's flexible for your schedule, and all it takes to get started is filling out a quick questionnaire that pairs you with a therapist who fits your needs. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/citycast today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/citycast. Moving on from the mayor's office, basketball refereeing, city council, one thing that's caught my attention this week is an update about the Narcan vending machines that the county started installing in August. So Narcan, also known as naloxone, it's the opioid overdose reversal drug. And the Narcan that's in these vending machines is totally free. And right now there's 3 of them around the county, one in the south side, one in McKeesport, and one in Brookline. So the county is now thinking about expanding this program, and they're currently thinking about bringing it to college campuses. But before we get to that, Mallory, I want you to guess how many of these vending machines are still functional. I know you haven't read this update story yet.
I mean, the fact that you're even asking me this question leads me to believe the answer is 0.
Close, a little better than that. 1.
Yeah, 1 out of 3. Credit to this story from Next Generation Newsroom. It was republished by the Union Progress. I mean, on its face, it's just like a straightforward explainer of the Narcan vending machine program and these plans to potentially like expand it. But then you start getting to the like a section where there's updates on the first wave of machines. So the one on the south side broke within a week of installation. They replaced it. That one also broke. So they haven't replaced it yet. And then another machine that was in McKeesport, it had to be removed, Mallory, for, wait for it, a zoning issue.
I was going to say originally, can we just get like a different vendor for these machines? But I guess it's a multitude of reasons that we're facing challenges with these.
The zoning one really gets me. Like, it's not like a big structure. This is a drug that can prevent people from dying. Like, it should be there.
Yeah, it's always freaking zoning in this town. It's wild to me.
Yeah, and I hope they get this sorted out, because Allegheny County has this dashboard that tracks drug overdose info, and there's generally been a decrease in emergency department visits from opioid overdoses since 2017. And in previous reporting, I've seen a health department official say that these decreases in fatal overdoses is because of harm reduction resources like free Narcan.
Yeah, this stuff is so important.
Yeah, and easy to use too. Like, it really is really simple. And the county has amazing resources for learning how to use it if you're nervous.
Yeah, and these vending machines also had instructions on how to use it. So not
True.
just dispensing, like actually providing the information. So if you are still looking for Narcan, there are still plenty of other ways to get it for free in the county without going to a vending machine, because unless
A
you're in
broken vending
Brookline,
machine.
yeah, it might not be super helpful. So Jade Wellness in the South Side, that's actually where one of the vending machines was.
The broken
Wellness
one.
Center, yeah, the Wellness Center is still giving out Narcan. Obviously, that's just not available 24/7, but you can go inside and ask. Allegheny County's harm reduction website also has a request form for free Narcan. It is very buried. It's hard to find, but it's tinyurl.com/OPP-Narcan. And then Prevention Point Pittsburgh also distributes it.
And despite these challenges with the first round of vending machines, you said there's actually this goal of expanding them to college campuses here?
Yeah, so they're still trying to expand this program, not necessarily always through vending machines. I just think a bunch of organizations are looking to make Narcan more accessible. And CMU already distributes Narcan along with a lot of other medical supplies.
Yeah, Chatham and Pitt are getting them soon. It sounds like this is also through the Allegheny County Health Department. So it sounds like a bunch of different organizations have been looking at this for a while and hopefully trying to increase access all over our region.
So, while we're on the topic of harm reduction, I saw a story recently in KDKA about the city's needle exchange program starting back up again. So the city stopped giving out clean needles last year because, some people weren't happy seeing used needles on the ground around our rivers, those kind of complaints that you hear. But the city is now going to start distributing them again and giving out Sharps disposal boxes along with the needles at the same time. This is a model that Prevention Point uses, which is an organization, Sophia, you mentioned a little earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is an imperfect idea for many reasons. I know that as I'm saying it out loud, but I do wonder if Sharps boxes and stuff like that could be installed in public places, like the same way we, made hand sanitizer more accessible to the public for a while, or the way some state parks are now offering sunscreen. I know that they could be vandalized or broken into, but I just feel like having a safe disposal spot handy might help with some of that, and also just be more useful to the populations that need them.
Oh, yeah, totally. I think this would definitely help out with other medical needs, too. My partner has type 1 diabetes, and if he needs to take insulin while we're out and about, sometimes I'm there, cupping my hands to make sure his needle's okay and not, blowing away. And, he carries something to drop them off in and then, dispose of them safely at home. But, I think just expanding this kind of access is definitely useful for everyone.
Yeah, usually a good solution for one issue benefits a lot of people in a lot of different situations.
Totally.
And, in that KDK story, I saw someone from our public safety department mention that when people do report used syringes, public safety and city council, they work together to try to make sure that they're cleaned up.
Yeah. And one more plug for Prevention Point. Their website has so much information, including, how to administer Narcan. Plus, they say they'll also connect folks with other services if they're also looking for things like food or shelter. Their office is in Oakland, but they do pop-ups around the city in a mobile van almost every day of the week. So if you need these kind of resources or want to direct someone to them, check out their website to find out where they'll be and when.
So we very briefly mentioned this on Wednesday's show. Please go back and listen if you haven't yet. It's full of all of our recommendations for the fun stuff to do in Pittsburgh in November. But yeah, Governor Josh Shapiro recently announced some good news. Over $600 million to go towards downtown Pittsburgh to give it a big makeover. At least that's the projected number. So the plan is to fully revamp downtown over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and so many different groups are coming together to make this happen. The money is coming from a bunch of different sources. So the state is going to give us $62 million. The city and the URA are committing $22 million. A bunch of foundations and companies are pitching in, like Giant Eagle and Heinz Endowments. Our major sports teams are on board. It's just a lot of people coming together. And the idea that's been presented, at least, is to put this money toward things like creating more housing downtown, improving public safety, revamping public spaces so that the area feels more like a neighborhood. One example that I noticed looking through the plan is the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust is putting $30 million toward turning parking lots that don't get used much into an outdoor event destination. And this would include restrooms, which, I don't know, I think maybe that's the number one thing that people have been begging for downtown.
More bathrooms, always nice. But I also want people to actually redo Market Square for pedestrians only, please.
Sadly, Sophia, it seems like that plan has already been scrapped. Earlier this year, some local leaders presented a vision for a more neighborhoody downtown, and it included making Market Square fully pedestrian, like this pedestrian plaza.
It was nice. It was a good dream.
Probably as expected, some business owners were not thrilled about the vision, and it kind of got pushed to the side because we can't have these nice things. We're car supremacy in this country. It looks from this plan like they are going to renovate Market Square, but they're going to do things like add tables and benches and expand dining space, not close it off to traffic.
I mean, it is a 10-year plan. I'm going to maintain hope in my heart that there is
true.
time to rethink a few things in it. For the love of God, no cars in Market Square. It's so dangerous over there.
I actually think it's a worse idea to add more benches, more tables, more people, and also keep the cars. People like myself already cross like it's pedestrian only, even though it's not. So I don't think this is going to be safe. But I don't know. Maybe they'll just do a really good job with the paving and some signs.
Yeah, and it seems like some of the objections were that a lot of the traffic that rolls through there are delivery vehicles, which also makes it extra dangerous to be running into that street as like a giant delivery truck is coming around. But anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there is some cool stuff like an artisan residence program downtown, for example. But I am still kind of skeptical because like this initial plan that they released, it only accounts for how some of that $600 million might be spent. And by my math, it only represents about $122 million in the projects that they list.
Missing a lot of millions.
I know. I would just like to see more detail about where the rest is going and where exactly it's coming from. Because as we have talked about a lot on this show in the last couple weeks, our city and our county are very cash strapped right now. And we were just talking about this breakdown in trust between city council and the mayor. So I just think there's some real questions here as we try to imagine everyone agreeing on what we're going to be spending money on. Also, to be clear, Mallory, you did say this, but I think we should emphasize $600 million. It's not money in the bank already. The plan is basically banking on developers to contribute a ton of it, like I think $375 million worth. Like to me, that reads as a really expensive promise ring, not a totally done deal.
Right. I think the idea is they will see this kind of investment and make investments of their own, but it's not like we've got that in our hands at this very moment.
We've always been talking about revitalizing downtown. Like they could have put in the money earlier if they really wanted to.
That was the big story the summer I moved here over a decade ago, was a revitalized downtown. We love to do it.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, Market Square, which we're all saying would be a lovely pedestrian plaza, like that came about in that last round of revitalization. So some stuff has happened. But yeah, I think it's fair to have some skepticism of a plan that includes money that we don't yet have. And to your point, Megan, related to, you know, what happened with Scirotto, like this big announcement about this major investment downtown, it came out the very same day Scirotto announced he'd be retiring.
True.
And that story in a lot of ways eclipsed this one. Like the big conversation that day and really in the days since has been what happened with our police chief. And it kind of put a damper on what should have been this really celebratory day for the city, because this is a really huge investment. I mean, even without money from developers and whether or not that'll come through, like this is a lot of money that a lot of groups have come together to dedicate to this part of the city.
It was also just sort of a funny media day because you had people like Governor Josh Shapiro doing like sort of the Kamala Harris style like influencer hits. Like I saw Shapiro in so many Pittsburgh influencers feeds, just like on this.
Because he came here to announce this, right?
Yeah, yeah. And he was like on this like rotating platform doing his little like Obama like spiel. It was and, like to the point that the influencers, like one in particular I saw, like literally just stepped back and was giggling, never spoke on his own reel at all. He just like kind of let Shapiro do his thing. It was really funny.
But this whole plan and the money is something we're going to keep asking questions about. So stick with us for updates as we learn more.
So let's talk about what we're going to be thinking about this weekend. I will go first because I have two. I'm extra. First of all, some Pittsburgh celebrity news. I don't know if y'all have been following any of this, but I feel like there's been like a bunch of it popping up in my feeds. So the Jeff Goldblum show, the Netflix show that he was on, Chaos, it's been canceled. Sophia, did you ever watch it? You seemed really excited.
Sophia, you're the reason.
Part
You're
of the problem.
Oh, well, I'll live.
Speaking of Josh Shapiro, he was on The Daily Show this week. So Jon Stewart, the old host of The Daily Show, is back, but he only hosts one day a week. But he was on the Jon Stewart day, which gets like way higher ratings than all the other days. He had sort of a funny little one-liner exchange with Jon Stewart about like what it was like to be vetted for vice president, which of course he did not get. But he also talked a lot about Gaza, which I was surprised by. I invite you to go check it out because I don't want to try to paraphrase that for the governor. Moving on, Michael Keaton, who is also from Pittsburgh, he was on Saturday Night Live. He talked very, very briefly in the opening monologue about his first film job as a PA on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Oh, I didn't realize that was his first film job.
It was his very first. The whole opening monologue is super short and it's on YouTube. Go check it out if you want to. It is not the joke I thought he was going to make. And then last one for the celebrities was Khalifa's Pittsburgh house is up for sale. Pittsburgh, I'm using that loosely. It's actually in Washington County. Pittsburgh Magazine has a bunch of photos of it. Sounds like, Sophia, you had a fairly strong reaction to some of that.
I don't like it. It's too modern. The kitchen really beautiful because like huge island and then floor to ceiling windows. But like the rest of it, not that cute. Like, you can see the air ducts everywhere, and I hate that. Some of the rooms have like the metal from the air ducts, a stone wall.
I mean, that's a look. That's an aesthetic these days.
And then wood panel, and then hardwood floors. That's too many different kinds of materials.
Sophia, I think you're just really upset because you're an audio producer, and that would be terrible sound.
I'm looking now, and I will say a barn door is a bathroom door. That is where I draw the line.
It's also a frosted glass barn door, which makes it worse. And the laundry room barn door that's frosted has like laundry on it, and he's got another one that says coats. Like, you need to label your rooms.
Maybe he does. I think Wiz Khalifa is famously often very high. So maybe he literally does need those labels, Sophia.
Who's doing laundry while they're high?
And then my other thing I'll be thinking about, just a small acknowledgement, I think, that the 4 unions who walked off the job at the Post-Gazette have now been striking for over 2 years. So they all passed that milestone in the last few weeks. It's one of the longest strikes in U.S. history.
Yeah.
Doesn't show any signs of ending. The 4 unions are all on different legal paths at this point, but there was a hearing last week that represented some of the striking workers. They were really hoping for an injunction that would have compelled the newspaper to take them back to work or be held in contempt of court. But the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, they wanted more time to prepare. So they're planning to pick that all back up on November 20th. Our hearts go out to our neighbors who have been striking this long. It's so frustrating to observe, and I'm sure it's very frustrating to live.
Oh, absolutely. So a piece of good news, though, I'm thinking about more health stuff. Mission of Mercy is running a free dental, vision, and hearing clinic. It's downtown this weekend at the convention center, November 1st, but it's also happening November 2nd. So you can still go if you're booked up today. This opens at 6 a.m. It's first come, first serve until they're just at capacity. And everything there is entirely free, no insurance needed. And WESA reported that last year, the clinic provided care for more than 1,700 people, plus gave out 750 pairs of glasses and 274 sets of hearing aids. So if this is the kind of care you need, definitely go check that out.
Thanks for flagging that, Sophia. That's really great. Mine is sillier, but Halloween is officially over. If you are like me and you're kind of mourning the end of this season, there is a fun way to extend it through this weekend. So back when we did our guide to October, I mentioned that I was really excited to check out The Nightmare Before Mixtape at Mixtape in Garfield. They have transformed their space into this Tim Burton-themed wonderland. I got to go last weekend. It exceeded all of my expectations. The decorations are incredible. There are themed cocktails and games, and it is still happening this weekend through November 2nd. So this is my personal recommendation if you are trying to squeeze like that very last drop out of spooky season, is get yourself a ticket to The Nightmare Before Mixtape.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Our music is by Benji. Mallory Falk is the executive producer. Sophia Lowe produces our show. Francesca DeBecco and Adrienne Gonzalez wrote our newsletter. And I am your host, Megan Harris. We'll be back on Monday with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend, everyone. Sophia made the cake, Mallory decorated, and I put a cherry on top. Good.